thrilled to be joined by the award-winning author of novels for teens and tweens, Sarah Aronson. Sarah has written countless books such as Just Like Rube Goldberg, Headcase, Beyond Lucky, and her recent short story featured in the coming-of-age 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories anthology, The Assignments. When she's not writing, you can find Sarah practicing yoga, riding her bike, and talking to readers about social action, writing, creativity, and more. Ever since Sarah started writing, she hasn't stopped, and she continues to try new things. I can't wait to hear more about Sarah's books, writing, and inspirational thoughts. And now, without further delay, I'm honored to welcome Sarah Aronson to E-Train Talks. Thanks so much for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be fun.
It is, and I'm super excited for you to be here today because I know that you are a huge contributor to the Literacy for All program. Well, you promote literacy, you lead the fight for change. And I watched your anti-Semitism webinar for Nerd Camp PA, and I was inspired to make a difference, and so many others were as well. So let's get into the first question.
Sure.
So your story, The Assignments, follows young Sarah and her quest to become the third Bat Mitzvah in her congregation's history. And along her short but sweet journey, she faces anti-Semitism, a tricky history project. And through all that, has a Bat Mitzvah to get ready for. While your story was only a few pages in length, the message shared profoundly impacted me as a reader. Did you or someone you know go through any similar experiences as Sarah?
It's totally true. That story, when Jonathan came to me and asked me to contribute to this anthology, I knew immediately that I was going to tell the story of my bat mitzvah and how I found out that my mother dated Abby Hoffman, which was really exactly as I wrote it. I had that assignment for school. I didn't like any of the choices. At the bottom of the page was this name, and I really thought Abby Hoffman was a woman. So I went at it. I think that when I think about that time, and I think about what I felt then, which I didn't have to guess at, because all those journal entries in the story are from my journal.
Really?
That during my bat mitzvah, no, I wasn't just empowered as a now Jewish adult. I didn't just learn things and strive for more in a way that I had never been asked to in the past, but figuring out that my mom had been like somebody other than my mom was really impactful and gave me a vision of the future for myself, that learning and doing things and doing the right things doesn't end with just having a bat mitzvah.
Well, sounds like a super crazy story. I want to be in your head when that happened. Like, wow, my mom dated Abby Hoffman. And speaking of Abby Hoffman, so you included the political icon Abby Hoffman in the assignment, a detail that I found very interesting because I had never heard the name beforehand. So while you did share some of his story in your short story, I'm sure our listeners, and myself included, are curious to know more. Will you share what you know about Abby Hoffman and why you chose? Obviously, this is a story about your story, but why did you decide to include this detail in Sarah's journey?
So when I was a kid growing up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, there were not a lot of other Jewish kids and not a lot of other Jewish advocates. And I was one of those kids who was just determined to change the world. And when I saw something that didn't feel right, I went at it. And that's why one of my heroes is Bella Abzug, who was a feminist and activist and trailblazer during the 70s. And I have a book coming out about her.
Ooh.
I know. Anyway, so Abby, when I found out who Abby Hoffman was, I could not get enough of it. I read about him. I actually got to meet him when I was in college. He was a trailblazer. He was a political activist. He was a big mouth. He was a person who would raise a ruckus for no reason at all, but because he enjoyed it. He enjoyed getting people emotional and excited and ready to change the world. He was still around. I think that he would look at today's political climate and have so much to say to young progressives who are looking for leadership and who are looking to find a way to make that change real.
Well, I certainly want to meet Abbie Hoffman. I would want to meet him. And it's certainly the Jewish spirit to make people emotional, whether it's in a good way or a bad way. And I feel so inspired by Abbie Hoffman, and I have to do more research about him as well. And I would want to read a biography about him, especially from an author like you, who I also just read the digital copy of your brand new picture book, Brand New Bubby. And you're just an incredible author, and you write stories that we need to read, whether they're picture books, YA, although I haven't read YA, but I assume you're a very amazing YA author, and middle grade. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about Brand New Bubby, and I'm sure everybody else is as well. So you have a picture book called Brand New Bubby, coming out soon, and it's so compelling. It's a story that includes themes like divorce, cooking, and the true meaning of family. I, for one, had to and did and loved this picture book. It's so meaningful and important. What can you share about Brand New Bubby? And do you have any other writing projects in the works?
Yeah, I do. So first of all, I just want to kvel a little bit about Ariel Landy. Isn't the art great?
It is.
I love the pets. And I love how she depicted the grandmas. None of them are old and, hanging around. They're all active, like so many grandmas are. So I decided to write that book when my stepson and his wife announced that they were going to have a baby. Sylvie's now 4 years old. And a friend of mine said to me, "Do you think it's going to be weird that you're not technically related?" And I was like, "Technically related? We're related. We're family. Family is made of love." And then my brain went boom, 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 boom. I got to write about this. That's how all my projects start, with me feeling either excited or curious or sort of irritated about something. And then I've just got to work it out. And so that book actually came fairly quickly because I'm part of a blended family, I know that it takes some work to bring people together and to know each other and then learn to love each other and to use that love and that family to grow and do great things. So I was really excited to do this book. It's been so much fun already to see it going out into the world and to talk to kids about what I'm doing now. Is I'm making a new family tree. I'm calling it the family constellation. And instead of thinking about family as just blood, I'm going to ask young readers to think about who are the people who bring light into your life. Who are the people who you love, who listen to you, who help you, who celebrate you, who wave their pom-poms. All of those people, that's family. It's diverse, it's important, these people are important, and we need to find a way to celebrate and acknowledge them. So, projects I've got going. I am one of those writers who works on more than one thing at a time. Because I have so many interests and because I feel strongly about writing whatever I'm curious about. I'm not, as you've already noticed, genre, I write them all. Ideas, if an idea comes to me, I'm always going to say yes. The only thing I can say that's true about all my books is that they feature Jewish people. And that's because I feel like diverse books are not just for diverse people, that we learn kindness. Actually, we don't really need to learn kindness. Kindness just comes along, but we get away from fear and hate by getting to know people who are not like us. So you'll always find a Jewish character in all of my books. So what I'm working on now, one, I'm almost finished with a picture book about a guy named Marty Glickman, who I thought was just the voice of New York sports for like 55 years. And he was Jewish, and he trained Marv Albert, and he was really cool and fun. But then I found out that in 1936, he was on the Olympic track team, and he was taken off the team at the last minute because he was Jewish.
Whoa.
I know, the Hitler Olympics. So, and he was friends with Jesse Owens, and Jesse Owens advocated for him to run the race, but because of anti-Semitism, he didn't. And he didn't let it stop him. Marty still loved sports, even when sports let him down. And I think that after, I've been working on this book a really long time, but since the pandemic, I thought this story is a story of now. I'm also working on, it's cool. I'm also working on a chapter book about a boy named Lawrence who is on the spectrum and who wants to clean up the world. He's really into environmentalism, but he needs a friend to help him. And I just pressed send on my first adult novel.
Ooh.
So, woo! About 4 Jewish ladies and a murder mystery.
Ooh. Well, when I'm an adult, I want to read that. And I'm super excited about all your projects because I am a huge fan of books with Jewish characters, for starters. I am a Jew. I'm proud of that. And reading about stories with anti-Semitism, it inspires me. And it teaches me a lot of new things.
I think that one of the things that is just so exciting to me is that when I read books.
I want to know yours. How can we fight anti-Semitism? And what's your opinion on the topic of Jewish books not being diverse?
So I think that when you remember that Jews are a minority, and when you consider that anti-Semitism is on the rise, I think that more and more, we no longer have to make the case that Jewish books are diverse books. We fit that classification. I also think that people have questions about this kind of thing, and that those questions, when they're unanswered, can lead to resentment. But when you answer questions and when we come together and show each other how we're different, but also how we're the same, then understanding comes, friendship grows, hate goes away. We are all together in this. And we really are all together in this.
Yeah.
To understanding other folk.
Thank you. And it's so important, especially now with anti-Semitism numbers at their highest since 1970. That's crazy. We have all this talk about just not discriminating, yet something that goes under our noses is that anti-Semitism is ramping up. And I want to do my part to say, hey, this stuff is happening. Anti-Semitism, it's evident in our society. So I'm so grateful for your books. And I 100% agree with you.
I remember a day when someone asked me where my horns were.
Wow.
Yeah. And when I explained to them that was a lie, and that was unkind, that person and I became closer. When we talk about our differences, when we feel the trust to ask each other questions about who we are, we're all going to grow.
Definitely. And sometimes it's more important to get Jewish books into the hands of non-Jewish readers than Jewish books into the hands of Jewish readers, because while we need to learn more about our heritage, there are kids who don't know anything about Jewish heritage. They're taught stereotypes and they just assume, for instance, maybe we have horns, maybe we just always fell the entire time, which is kind of true. So we need to get Jewish books into the hands of non-Jewish readers, and it's the same for all kinds of books. We need to read about characters that are different from us so we can learn from these stories, and we can be...
All right, number one, I want to hang out with Harriet the Spy. Harriet the Spy was the first book I ever loved. It's the book that made me a reader. It's the book, thank you, Dan Sigley, my first teacher who saw in me something more. He handed this to me and he said, I think you're going to like this book. And I think after that, I read it about 2,000 times. I loved Harriet, and I want to get my notebook and hang out with her and spy on everybody. But the other person who I would like to chat with is this kid. This is the very first book I ever read by myself, The Carrot Seed. It's 101 words long. Originally, it was 10,000 words long, but the writer had to edit it out.
You can just say young adult if you don't want to say teen.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to my next interview for the Eat Train Talks Coming of Age panel. I'm thrilled to be joined by the award-winning author of novels for teens and tweens, Debbie Reed Fisher. Debbie Reed Fisher worked for many years as a film and TV agent, as well as a middle school and high school English teacher. And I'm thrilled to have the chance to talk with her about her middle grade short story, part of the Coming of Age 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories anthology, This Is What I'll Tell You. Another entertaining and Jewish-themed story that I really loved. So thank you so much for talking books with me today, Debbie. I'm so glad you could join me on E-Train Talks.
Thank you very much for having me, E-Train. I'm so honored to be here, and I can't wait for us to get started.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about the coming of age stories and also just your work as a writer. So one thing I've loved learning is how all the authors came together to contribute their writing to such an important and meaningful Jewish-themed anthology. So will you share how you became involved with the novel and what the experience has been like working with other Jewish authors on coming of age?
Well, I think it's been one of the most meaningful and rewarding experiences I've ever had for a couple of reasons. Number one, there haven't been a lot of Jewish-themed books and stories that are included in the diversity movement, and we really do need diverse books. It's a wonderful movement. However, Jewish books should be included in that. So I was really excited about this project for that first reason. And the second reason being that 10% of the profits go to fight anti-Semitism. They go to organizations that fight anti-Semitism. So I really wanted to be involved in that. And as far as working with other Jewish authors, I have been a fan of some of my co-authors' work for many years. So it was really thrilling to meet some of them. And there are other authors in our lineup with whom I've been friends for a very long time. So it was really fun to work with friends and to make new friends with this for such a meaningful project.
That sounds like such a rewarding experience. And I think that it's really important what you're doing because, yeah, for one, Jewish books aren't necessarily considered diverse books by some people, even though, for starters, we're only about 2% of the entire world population, and there aren't nearly enough Jewish-themed books. Like, I can only name a few. Thankfully, there are organizations like PJ Library, PJ Our Way. They're amazing. They distribute a lot of Jewish-themed books, and they work with a lot of great authors. But other than that, there aren't many organizations, especially organizations that help write books for kids, because there are Jewish-themed books combating anti-Semitism for adults, but it's really hard to find some books like that for kids, tweens and teens especially. So I'm just very grateful that all of you amazing authors worked on such a meaningful project, and I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to win the giveaway, Melissa Roski's giveaway, and it was such a rewarding novel. Like, it was a rewarding experience for you, but it was also a rewarding experience for me to read all of your stories because I can relate to every single one of them, not just because I'm Jewish, but also you can kind of understand what all the characters are going through because they're all middle graders going through some pretty crazy times. Right. And I can certainly relate to that, and so many others can as well.
Well, I'm very happy for you both as a Jewish kid and as just a reader, just as a kid. So I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you for writing it. And I know that a lot of my friends and a lot of people I've worked with in the writing community adore your novel because it's just so meaningful and it's so true in a sense. Because I feel like all the experiences the characters go through, they're all real. Like,
Yes.
I think that it's another great example of realistic fiction because it's not necessarily a fictional story. All these stories, one, they may have happened to the authors. A couple of the coming of age authors I've talked to, they said that their experiences with their B'nai Mitzvahs, they really related to their protagonists. So I think that it just adds another great aspect because it's realistic. It's the real deal. So I think I'm just extremely grateful that you all incorporated parts of your writing in your life, as well as added fictional aspects and made it feel so real yet fictional at the same time.
Right. That's the fun of it, is weaving. I mean, that's very true for my story, which is called This Is What I'll Tell You. I wove a lot of autobiographical elements, things that really did happen to me. And then, of course, there's the fun of making things up. So it was a blend of the two, exactly as you say.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful blend at that. And now my next question is, so your story, This Is What I'll Tell You, includes interesting and relevant themes. In your story, the protagonist, Libby, tries to hide her Jewish faith from her peers, worried that she'll face anti-Semitism like at her old school. But along the way, your main character comes to realize that being Jewish is special and amazing. This inspiring message is one that I admire. So why did you decide to include this sad yet important message in your story?
Well, because it happened to me, number one. The anti-Semitism was autobiographical. That was actually true. And when we moved to Greece, the story does take place in Greece. There, we were told by some staff who had worked in the house. My father worked at the embassy, just to give you a little background. He's in the Air Force, but he was also a diplomat. And when you move into a house and your parent is in that position, it's a very large house that is used for receptions and gatherings on behalf of the United States. So you live there, but you also have a lot of official functions there. So it comes with a staff. And so we were told that the family that had been there before us said to the staff, you may not want to work for this family because they're Jews, they're Jewish. And so I included that in the story. And so all those things were real. What was not real was that I never had a bat mitzvah when I was 12 or 13. I had one when I was 18, much later, because at the time that I lived there, and I didn't put this in the story because it would have been a full-length novel instead of a short story, the synagogue in Athens, Greece at the time was actually shut down because there were so many death threats and terror threats, and it was a very dangerous place to openly be Jewish. Telling people on day one that I was Jewish, finding a way to work it into the conversation, because what I had learned from other places I'd moved is that if you don't get it out into the open right away, people then don't trust you. They think you're hiding something. So that only happens in an environment when you are the only Jewish person. If there are other Jewish people around you, it's not a big deal. Yeah. Then people in your community are very used to Jewish people. But if you are the only one and you keep it a secret, then when it does finally come out, and it will, because hiding who you are never works, just never, ever works, then they will never really trust you because they'll think that you were always hiding something. So, and that's actually an anti-Semitic myth or trope, stereotype, whatever you want to call it, is that Jews are not to be trusted. They're hiding things. They're shady. That's a very, very common stereotype. So I wanted to get it out in the open. My character doesn't do that, though. She hides it. And so This Is What I'll Tell You is kind of a play on words, meaning she's deciding what she's going to tell people, but by the end of the story, she realizes this is what she has to tell them because this is who she is, and she's proud of who she is by the end of the story.
Yeah, it felt like a whole full-length novel because I think all your character experiences, while it was only a short story, it was one chapter in the entire coming-of-age anthology, I feel like I wanted it to be a full-length novel. So that's just one reader telling you, you should definitely do that.
Thank you. Maybe I will. I appreciate that. Thank you, E.
Yeah, thank you. And another thing that I wanted to note, I think that I just honestly had no idea that, for starters, before our interview, that you traveled all over the world. Your dad was in the Air Force, worked at the embassies. I also didn't know that there was a lot of anti-Semitism. There's a lot of anti-Semitism all over the world. Like, you hear a lot about it in the US and Canada, but like, it's all over. And a lot of people don't really understand that and really don't recognize it.
Yes.
So
100%. Absolutely true.
yeah. And it kind of leads into like the topic that we were originally discussing, how people don't think that Jewish books are diverse books, when in reality they are, because we face a lot of anti-Semitism and we receive horrible threats sometimes. And I think that we need to we are diverse, and our stories are diverse, and our culture is diverse. So I think people really need to understand that.
100%. In fact, if you ask any law enforcement agency or any agency that tracks hate crimes, religious hate crimes, for religious hate crimes, anti-Semitic crimes top the list.
Wow.
Number one, more than any other faith. That is not only worldwide, it's also
100% agree. And I had no idea all of these horrible things were happening. I knew they were happening, but I just had no idea it was such a mass amount. And so many of the events, they aren't on the news, they aren't being talked about, and they need to be. The hate crimes need to stop. And it's just horrible. While all of these movements are occurring, all of these peaceful protests to like we need diverse books, we need diversity. Now anti-Semitism is at its peak. It's worse than it's been in 50, 40 years.
Exactly. I couldn't say it any better. You said it exactly perfect. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and that's the really hard truth. That's why I wanted to start this coming of age panel, because we need to educate people that for starters, we need Jewish themed books, but also we need to stop hate. We face a lot of mistreatment, unfortunately, and it's not getting talked about enough. So your stories are just truly inspiring, and I'm honestly mind blown that all these things are happening all over. And even just at a regular middle school, there's swastikas and hate. It's just, and also what's even worse is the principal, he said that the Holocaust didn't happen.
Right.
It's like there are also people denying that there's hate. It's just horrible.
Right. But you're doing the right thing. You're spreading the word, and you are part of the Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. So I bet your parents must be so proud of you. You should be proud of yourself. You are remarkable, talking about this and everything you've accomplished. And I don't believe you're 11. I don't. I think, come on, you're at least 25, 45.
Yeah, I honestly could be. I feel like this is like a job, even though I'm 11. It's a fun job though.
You're amazing.
Thank you. And now on to my next question. And before we move on, this may seem like a dark topic, everybody, but it's so true, and we need to accept that. So I know that there are many more interviews to come, and there needs to be more, actually. Like, we need to talk about this more, because there's hate going on, and we need to accept that. And more than just accept it, we need to do something. And I know that's a little bit of a dark topic to talk about in this book chat, but it's still important, and we need to discuss this topic. So one thing I enjoyed about This Is What I'll Tell You is that Libby had friends and family always by her side, encouraging her and giving her advice that would help Libby along her journey. Some themes that I loved in your short story are personal growth, friendship, and acceptance. So I know that we already discussed this question a little bit in the earlier questions, but were there any similarities between your character's Jewish adventures and yours as a middle grader? For instance, did you try and hide your Star of David necklace? Did you endure anti-Semitism, like at your old school, at different places that you lived, like Libby?
Great question. So I kept diaries or journals, however you want to call it. And I found them. I've always kept them close by. And I found a page in which it detailed when we first moved to Greece, and this was 1980. And the entry was, today the embassy told my dad to tell us we are not allowed to wear any T-shirts with Hebrew letters or any Jewish stars. We have to be very careful because of the anti-Semitism here. And at that time, I had a T-shirt I loved. It said Coca-Cola in Hebrew. Have you
I
seen
have
those
that
shirts?
shirt.
Oh, you have that shirt.
I also have a shirt that says YouTube in Hebrew as well.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. So, so that was really and that was my introduction to, welcome to Greece. And I had to really not wear anything with Jewish symbols. And I have to be honest, my sons, especially one of them is traveling through Europe and has been traveling through Europe. And whenever my kids travel to other places or other countries, I tell them, be aware of wherever you are. Has nothing to do with not having Jewish pride. My kids have a lot of Jewish pride, but it is just being aware that you need to know your surroundings and you need to read the room, as they say. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you do need to tuck that inside your shirt for your own safety. You're putting yourself in harm's way. It depends on where you are.
Yeah.
So that is the conversation that Jewish parents have to have with their kids when they travel. That, that you're not hiding who you are, because that's what my story is about. You can never hide who you are, but in certain situations, you don't want to make yourself a target either. So
it's not really hiding yourself though, as well. Like, it's kind of keeping yourself, you're protecting yourself. And
right.
You still always have to keep that pride. But yeah, like you said, we also have to be careful.
Right. You can't put your head in the sand. For example, my kids went to a Jewish day school. They went through eighth grade, kindergarten through eighth grade. And we have a police state, or they're not there anymore. They're grown-ups now. They had a police station. And so there was enough land to have a police station on campus, and it was very necessary. And whenever I had friends come and visit me, if I was doing a speaking presentation there, they were shocked at the amount of security. Years ago, I interviewed Judy Bloom on that campus. Yeah, I know. Wow. Right. And they had, so I invited some of my author friends to come, and they were shocked that they had to go through 2 security checkpoints, that there were armed officers at the front doors. We're very used to it. Yeah. This is something that is our reality. And so, I'm always so surprised. It always takes me by surprise when I visit my friends who aren't Jewish. If I go, I have a friend who's Indian, I've been to her temple, or I'll go, to a church, and there's no security there. You just kind of walk right in and everybody's very comfortable. It's not like that at a synagogue. We are very safety oriented because we have to be.
Yeah. So. And it's really horrible that we have to have so much security. And so I went to a Jewish day school for like 5 years, and I never really understood why there was always a police officer in like a little surveillance area. We had to check in. There was kind of like, there was a place where they checked like if we had our school sticker, they had to check us a little bit. So I always never really understood why there was somebody there. But now, after all these conversations and learning more and being more educated about anti-Semitism, now I really understand. And it's just, I can't believe that we face so much, and we have to be worried, like, because something can happen, like somebody can barge into our school or just do something horrible. We have to be wary of that all the time, and it's just horrible.
But at the same time, I have to tell you, so I was raised this way with all of the safety, right? But almost daily, my mother would say to me, I refuse to live in fear. My mother is an immigrant. She's from Cuba, which, and then her family fled Eastern Europe before that. So I have some relatives who were exiled twice in the same lifetime. Wow. So they had to rebuild their lives twice. So my mother used to say all the time, I refuse to live in fear. Do not live in fear. Go out and live your life. So it's kind of a balance between being aware of your surroundings, like I said before, kind of reading the room and making wise decisions about how to protect yourself, but still go out and live. We're not going to just, stay inside and be scared or stand down anymore, which is why this book came about also, because, a lot of Jewish authors were sort of speaking about how, all this anti-Semitism is going on. And whenever there's a display in a library for diverse books and they're showing religious diversity, Jewish books are never included. And so we decided to get loud and proud and start making our voices heard. So again, we do have to be safe, but we are not living in fear. And we are, very proud of being Jews.
Mm-hmm. we can't live in fear because anti-Semitism isn't automatically going to go away. We need to do something about it, and we can't be scared. We need to stand up and be proud of ourselves, like you said. And that leads me to my next question. I'm just trying to click on the script. The computer's acting weird. All right, I'll just edit that part out. So I know that one of the main reasons Coming of Age was written was to combat anti-Semitism. But what are other messages you'd like your readers to take away from Coming of Age 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories?
Well, even for kids who aren't Jewish, especially for kids who are not Jewish, what I'd like them to take away is, if you're proud of yourself, everyone else will be too. And bravery comes in all forms. Bravery doesn't necessarily mean you are fighting Godzilla. Just being who you are can be an act of bravery sometimes. Going over and saying hi to somebody who doesn't have any friends can be an act of bravery sometimes. And, there's a lot of that because moving as much as I did, either my best friend moved away every year or I moved away. So I had to find a new best friend every year for many years. And even my friends had to be brave in being my ally sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I wanted that to be a takeaway. And I also wanted, there's a stereotype that bar mitzvahs are just a big party, like a sweet 16.
Yeah.
It's not that at all. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of reflection. It's a big commitment. And it's a commitment for your whole family. In fact, in my most recent middle grade novel, it's called This Is Not the Abby Show. There's a bar mitzvah in that book as well. And it shows how all of that is affecting the sibling who is getting no attention, who has to listen to her brother practicing all day. And when she has friends over and she has to explain, oh my goodness, this chanting, I know it sounds weird, but he's practicing for his bar mitzvah and to explain what that is. And, I want kids who aren't Jewish to just understand how much work goes into it, how much family is involved. And again, it's really about being proud of yourself and that age of reckoning, of deciding what kind of person you want to be. So it's a very pivotal age when you're 12 or 13, and you really do kind of change after it. In fact, to become a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, you don't even have to do anything. It's just becoming that age. According to Judaism, you become a bar or bat mitzvah. So it's a celebration of that, but it's also a lot of work.
Yeah. So I think that it all kind of comes down to putting yourself out there, just being there for somebody, or just kind of walking up to somebody saying, I see that you're alone. Can I be your friend? Do you need somebody? Do you need help? I think that just asking, being there, and just kind of understanding others, I think that really putting yourself out there is the bravest thing you can do. Because Godzilla isn't going to come around and stomp on our city every single day. So, I think that just being there for somebody, being a good person, even when nobody else is, doing your best to be kind, whether that's sitting next to somebody at lunch, or
this is what I tell you, is it's a Muslim who saves the day for her, who shows her Jewish pride. And that actually was autobiographical. I had a lot of Muslim friends and classmates because about 50%, between 40 and 50% of the classmates at my school in Greece were from Muslim countries. And so, that definitely gives me a worldview in my writing and in my life. And as far as who influenced me and helped me, my parents were amazing. My husband is amazing. When I first started, he said, you've always wanted to write, so this is your chance, go do it. And he has supported me.
Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I'm thrilled to be joined by middle grade and YA author Stacy Rammy. Stacy happens to be a Scrabble master, Netflix binge watcher, and when she's not writing, spends time working with high school kids with autism, advocating and introducing them to the wonderful world of literacy. Stacy is one of the 13 incredible co-authors of the Jewish-themed coming-of-age anthology, and just so happens to write one of my favorites out of all the coming-of-age short stories, titled Without Being Asked, which we'll chat about more in a bit. It's such a treat having you on E-Train Talk, Stacy. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to learn more about your writing journey, and I know that you've had COVID, so I know that you've been a little overwhelmed, but I'm glad you're able to make it.
Yeah. Vaccinated, boosted.
Yeah.
Still in bed for 2.5 weeks. So stuff is real.
Stuff really is real. Stuff really is real. So without further delay, let's talk books.
Sounds great.
So your story, Without Being Asked, includes such meaningful themes like teenage crushes, acceptance, and friendship. All the essential components that made for a really, really great page-turning middle grade read. And your story also happens to be one of the only ones set in the current times, in the present. I really enjoyed your contribution to coming of age, but before we dig into your story, will you share how you ended up involved in the anthology?
Okay, so I happen to have really fantastic friends. That's been true my whole life. I've been very lucky. And I've also kind of aligned myself with people who feel similarly to me. So one of those friends was Jonathan Rosen, who was the editor, one of the editors for Coming of Age. And he and I have been in a critique group together for, I think, 12 years now.
Wow.
And, he's kind of the one I go to for guidance on writing all the time. He's one of my writing besties, and he's also such a great human being. So when he put this together, he asked me if I would be willing to work on it. And I have to tell you, short stories are stressful for me because you have to cover so much in such a small, and I've really only worked on long form, like novels, but it was just a great challenge, and I really love being part of it.
And you were certainly up for the task, writing Without Being Asked, which was probably one of my favorites. Even if short stories were a bit of a struggle, I know that all the readers really...
My dogs like to weigh in.
Yeah, I really, that's such a great opinion. A dog, you're very smart.
They feel like their opinions should be listened to, and I agree.
Yeah, I agree as well. So one thing I found unique about Without Being Asked is that it compared to the other stories in the anthology. And compared to it, they were a little different. Like the two protagonists, they didn't have the same feelings for each other. One had a crush, and only after time went by was there any hope of their feelings being returned. Why did you decide to write your story featuring unrequited love? And what do you think Wolf and Steph would be doing now?
Well, I'm not really sure what Wolf and Steph would be doing now, but I know they're in each other's lives in a meaningful way. And I think a lot of times that we kind of, when we find someone who is a kindred spirit, even if they're vastly different than we are, but they're interesting in other ways, and you just feel pulled to them for whatever reason, you don't want to let that go, right? And feelings can change. Feelings can start out as friendships and become more, or sometimes they just stay as friendships. And I kind of hate the word just there, because friends are the most important thing in the world. And it's just all about caring for each other and respecting each other and being there for each other. So that's really what I wanted to convey. So whether Steph and Wolfie in college now are, getting ready to get married, or, or go backpacking in Europe, or whatever their plans are, I know that they're going to be in their lives, each other's lives forever.
Well, that's such a unique take, and I'm so glad to hear that you believe that the two characters will be friends, if not more than friends in the future, because they're really great protagonists, and I feel like despite their differences, they really make a great duo, and I'd love to read a full novel about their experiences together. And
I may have to work on that.
Yeah, I definitely like that. And as we've heard from the other coming-of-age authors, one of the main reasons Coming of Age was written was to combat anti-Semitism, which, as a Jew myself, I find to be an extremely important message to send to readers of any age. But I'm wondering if there happens to be any other messages you're hoping your readers will take away from Coming of Age 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories.
Well, this particular story for me was very personal because it's about kindness.
Yeah.
And about seeing somebody else's perspective, even when it's not convenient, or and especially at a time in your life when you're trying to sort of figure out what your actual perspectives are, and what's really important to you at your core. So I feel like, the theme of friendship is fantastic. The theme of caring for each other is fantastic. But I just even think trying to see somebody else's point of view is so important. And I think I think we need books for that. That's how empathy is learned, through stories. And I'm hoping that this story can reach people in that way.
It certainly reached me. I know that a lot of other readers felt the same way. And that's such an inspiring theme. And I'm glad that you added that. All of the authors added that to coming of age. And I'm always interested in learning more about writers' experiences leading up to their work as an author, or just their work in the coming of age anthology. So I often ask people if there was anybody in your life, a parent, favorite author, role model, or somebody else, who really inspired you to pursue a writing career. Do you have anybody like that?
Well, so I was one of those people who never knew what I wanted to do with my life. Mm-hmm. And it always sort of made me feel less than, because like people all around me knew what they wanted to do. Like one girl in second grade knew she wanted to be a historian. I was like, wow, that's like a bold thing to know. And she is one now. I don't really keep in touch with her, but this was her life's goal, but I didn't have that. And I was good at school, but I wasn't really good at anything else, and it wasn't like my job to get, like, I wasn't mother's side of the conversation, but I knew what it was about. You can figure that stuff out, right? So she said, Stacy's allowed to read whatever she wants to read. And then she hung up and she said to me, don't let anybody ever tell you what to read or what to think. And that really stayed with me. My parents were a very strong presence in my life. I lost them both, unfortunately, 10 years ago. I miss them every single day. My mom's birthday was yesterday, actually. But just instilling that love of reading and the knowledge that I can be trusted with my decisions was just such an important part of my pathway to writing.
That does sound like an important, really just inspiring moment in your life. Like you had an epiphany. I can read what I want. Maybe I can write what I want. And I think that moment, it probably, and I know that a lot of kids, we don't really know what we want to do when we grow up.
And to annoy people who have been mean to her. And I'm one of those people as well. I like to annoy people who are mean to me because they don't have a right to be mean to me or anybody else. Like I love Maurice Sendak was my first favorite author with Where the Wild Things Are. So maybe I'd want to meet him or John Stein.
Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train and welcome to E-Train Talks, where I discuss everything books in the hopes of inspiring others to love reading as much as I do. Today, I'm thrilled to be chatting with middle grade author and editor Jonathan Rosen. Jonathan is the administrator of FromTheMixedUpFiles.com, a site devoted to middle grade books, and he's a founding member of SpookyMG.com, a website devoted to everything spooky and middle grade books. Today, I'm happy to be talking to Jonathan about his newest novel, Coming of Age, 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories, a Jewish anthology he co-authored and edited. We'll also be chatting about his coming-of-age short story, Pocket Watch. I'm excited to learn about Jonathan's writing journey, as well as what led him to help create this entertaining and meaningful anthology of Jewish B'nai Mitzvah stories. But before we get into our book chat, I'm going to share a few things I learned about Jonathan while doing some online research. I know that there are 3 things that Jonathan and I have in common. 1, we're both Jewish. 2, we are both fans of Phineas and Ferb. And 3, we both think Spider-Man is hands down the greatest superhero that ever lived.
Amen to that.
Yeah. So even if you haven't read and loved the Coming of Age anthology, you are going to be a big fan, but from listening to our interview. And on that note, I want to thank you so much for joining me today, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so grateful that you came here today because my goal of the Coming of Age author panel is to combat anti-Semitism, and your Coming of Age anthology, that's its main goal. To combat anti-Semitism, because unfortunately, us Jews, we're facing a lot of hate lately. There's more anti-Semitism now. Like it hasn't been as bad as this since the 1970s, and it's just horrible to think about. So Coming of Age was such a fun and meaningful read, filled with 13 unique and entertaining stories about 13 different kids experiencing one thing in common, their Jewish bar or bat mitzvah. As someone that will be going through my own bar mitzvah, I really appreciated reading about the experiences of all the 13 protagonists. and just learning about what a bar or bat mitzvah is. And it wouldn't be a Jewish ceremony if there wasn't some drama involved. And I know that all middle graders, whether they're Jewish or they're not, they can really relate to what each of the main characters go through. That's one of the reasons that I really love the Coming of Age 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories anthology. So I mentioned that you're one of the creators of the idea of the Coming of Age anthology. So will you share a bit about Coming of Age 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories and how the project came to be?
It really was a desire to see more Jewish stories out there. It's something that, I've always been told through the years, myself and other authors, that make something less Jewish or so, to books. So I wanted to see more Jewish stories out there. And I approached, my co-editor, Henry, and let's, do this. We got some people together and, everyone pretty much jumped right in. All the authors that we asked readily agreed right off the bat. So there was no convincing. So that was great. And, we wanted to do it, one, just bring Jewish stories to there. And you mentioned, I don't know if the main purpose was to fight anti-Semitism. That was just a side benefit. The main purpose was really just to entertain, just get Jewish representation. But the, bringing light to anti-Semitism was definitely one of the side benefits of it.
Yeah. So, from what I've heard, the coming of age story, it's there's a lot of work involved. Like, how do you it's so interesting. Like, I've never really read an anthology before. So I just find it so impressive that you managed to get 13 authors on board, and they're all just entertaining the readers. And the stories are about bar mitzvahs and b'nai mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, but they're also just really relatable to both middle grade readers who are Jewish and aren't. And I think that's what's really great about the coming of age anthology, because it can really just entertain all readers, and it sheds a light on the Jewish story. And it can also, like, for others who don't really understand a b'nai mitzvah, but it can also make Jewish readers kind of feel seen, and they know that somebody is going through the same experiences as them, whether they're fictional or real.
That was definitely one of the main points that we wanted to do. And I know certainly what I wanted to do is have Jewish kids see themselves in the stories and being able to relate. I'm going through this problem. You yourself were talking about, you're going to have a bar mitzvah, so that they can relate to the Jewish protagonist going through the same thing. And like you just said, we want other kids, non-Jews, to be able to relate to the stories as well. Hey, we might not be going through a bar mitzvah, but we might have family problems that are going through a big ceremony. We might have friend problems, or just like studying problems. So every kid can relate in some way to the stories in this anthology.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably one of my favorite aspects. And it leads me to my first question. So one reason I'm so glad to be talking about coming of age on my podcast is that we can share information about the Jewish culture to the listeners. So having a B'nai Mitzvah is an important coming of age event that many Jewish teens experience, and yet very little information seems to be known about what a bar or bat mitzvah is. And some kids who aren't Jewish don't really understand what a B'nai Mitzvah is. So I'm hoping your book can help change that. So would you explain a little bit about what a bar or bat mitzvah is, and if you had a bar mitzvah?
I did. Really, it's just like a coming of age, a rite of passage, a coming of age, like the story here, like the title. It's, ritual where a Jewish child, becomes ages 13 or 12, boys or girls, and they're considered now an adult in Jewish eyes. They're ready to take part in Jewish ceremonies and Jewish customs and take their place among, their peers, and they're counted as a voice of Jewish representation. So yes, it really is just, like I said, a rite of passage. I did have my bar mitzvah. I had mine. I was living in Israel at the time, and I had my bar mitzvah actually at the Western Wall. And then
wow,
we had I had a great time there. I enjoyed it. I took in the sense of history. And then we had the party somewhere else. I was living in an absorption center, and we had the party that night at a bomb shelter.
Well, that sounds like a very eventful experience, and also one that's very meaningful, because the Western Wall is so important in is like Hebrew history, like Israeli history. because that's one of the walls of the Jewish temple, like our temple thousands of years ago. So it's a very like meaningful piece of history. So that must have been such a great and grand experience.
I was. I really, really enjoyed it then. I recently went back to Israel a couple of years ago, and we visited the wall, and it was probably even more meaningful now, just because at the time I was like so involved with my bar mitzvah that I didn't get to appreciate it as much. But now going back and looking and seeing other kids getting ready for their bar mitzvahs there, it made me appreciate it that much more.
Yeah, and that was such an interesting answer. And my next question is kind of leaning towards The Pocket Watch, your short story in the Coming of Age anthology. So in your short story, The Pocket Watch, the protagonist Daniel's grandpa gives him a watch that he claims is a time machine, and his claims turn out to be true. Daniel travels hundreds of years into the past, and on each occasion, he ends up in places with signs saying no Jews allowed, or even worse. Daniel comes to learn to be grateful for all he has in the present, because at one time, he wouldn't even have been allowed to have a bar mitzvah. This is such a meaningful tale, and I'm so grateful you wrote it. Was there anything in particular that inspired you to write your short story?
First and foremost, I just wanted to entertain. I really wanted to talk about that. I love time travel. I love science fiction. So I didn't think there would be any science fiction stories other than mine. And there wound up being a few in there. But I wanted to entertain. But I also wanted to relay the message that the important thing was, the ritual, the ceremony, not necessarily the party. Didn't matter how much you spent on your parties, didn't matter, what celebrities you're going to have there, or if you're going to hire dancers, hire a singer, hire a rapper, whatever it is. It's the main thing it's the passing down of the custom, passing down of the ritual. And that's what I wanted Daniel to know, because at the beginning of the story, he's obsessed that other friends are having more at their bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvahs than he's having. So I wanted that to be the main message, that all that stuff doesn't matter. This is what matters.
Yeah, and your short story is one of my favorites because it's a real reminder that a bar mitzvah or B'nai Mitzvah, it isn't supposed to be a party. Like many people think of a B'nai Mitzvah as like a party, but it's a lot more than that. So I think that Daniel's story is a really great reminder that a bar mitzvah, it's so important, and it's more than just a party. It's a rite of passage, and so many Jews have done it over the years, and it's really important. You have to remember that.
Absolutely. That's exactly the point. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you. And that's exactly the point that I was trying to make, that and take in the ritual, take in the custom, and be proud of what you're doing, what you're accomplishing. Be proud that you're going to now be considered part of the Jewish community.
Yeah. And I can't wait for my bar mitzvah. So I find it shocking that some people believe that Jewish-themed books aren't considered diverse. Have you heard this? And if so, do you happen to know why Jewish books aren't considered diverse? And how can we combat that?
Well, yes, I've heard people trying to keep Jewish books out of the discussion of diverse books. I've heard entire groups doing that. Why that is? Plain and simple. It's anti-Semitism, plain and simple. It's, hey, we want to accept everyone. Every voice is, wants to be accepted and represented, but not you guys, not the Jews.
Yeah.
So that's plain and simple what it is, no matter how much someone else will deny to the contrary. So that's one of the things but you combat it, you keep calling them out on it, keep telling them that, yes, we are diverse voices. Yes, we count, and we are going to be heard.
That is so true. And it's so, to everybody who doesn't really consider Jewish books to be diverse, I've just got to say, we really have to combat that. And we're going to stand up for what we believe in, and because we need to be heard. And I think that's a great message that you and the other authors of the Coming of Age anthology really relay, like time and time again. Like the characters, they stand up for themselves. They're proud of who they are. And just having that pride and we're proud of who we are. We need to remember that.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. No, you should be proud of anything you are. And I want other Jewish kids to be proud of who they are, not to say I have to hide it, or I'm ashamed, or I'm scared. Be proud of who you are. Yeah.
And also another question that I'd like to add is, what was the process of editing 13 different stories into one anthology?
It was sometimes a pain, but mostly fun. It's, there were no criteria. There's no criteria given to the authors that you have to do this or have to do that, other than it has to be a story about a bar or bat mitzvah. That was the only thing that they had to do. So everyone, like you mentioned before, and like I mentioned, there are a lot of different types of stories in here, and that was the fun part. There were, you had like memoir type stories, you had just like fiction stories, you had science fiction stories. So you had a lot of different themes and genres within the stories, and it was really just fun to editing and seeing all the different types of stories and passing them along. And at the end, that we had 13 authors really kind of fit for a story about a bar mitzvah, anthology, bat mitzvah anthology.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you didn't really put strict restrictions on the authors, because it's just so great that there are like there's wide varieties of stories and genres. And as someone who aspires to be an author someday, can you share how you ended up pursuing a career in writing? Was there someone who inspired you to become a writer?
The one who inspired me the most is really, I was always writing stories, and I probably really started on your age, writing a lot of stories for myself, for, friends, family. But the one who inspired me the most was a teacher in high school, and her name was Mrs. Burney. And she told me that one day, she told me after class that you have a talent for this, and that's right. And, people say it all the time, but it's true. And then keep writing, write and write and write. It's not about the writing, really. It's more about the revision later. You have to go back and fix your mistakes.
Now I'm thrilled to be joined by middle grade author and former journalist, Melissa Roska. Melissa happens to be a certified NYU life coach, an active blogger on the middle grade book website full of interesting interviews and fun content from the mixed up files of middle grade authors, and a professional joke selector for Reader's Digest. That is a profession I'm really interested to learn about. Melissa is one of the 13 incredible co-authors of the Jewish-themed coming-of-age anthology, and just so happens to write one of my most cherished coming-of-age short stories, titled Grandma Merle's Last Wish, which we'll chat more about in a bit. It's such a treat having you on E Train Talks. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, E. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, and I just want to say on behalf of myself and all of the other middle grade authors, we think you're awesome. We think you're doing a great job for the middle grade community, and you're amazing. So there you go.
Thank you. It means a lot. And I know this is just one of the many interviews that you've taken part in, but I've got to say, Coming of Age is the first anthology I've ever read, and certainly the best that I'm ever going to read, because it touches on such important themes like anti-Semitism and just kind of coming of age in general. That it is called the Coming of Age anthology. And my first question is basically, how did you get into this whole coming of age anthology?
My friend Jonathan Rosen and I, for many, many years, were talking about the importance of having a middle grade anthology about bar and bat mitzvahs. So, we were batting ideas back and forth and chatting about it. And then Jonathan came up with this amazing idea to really go for it. He got the connections. He met up with his co-author, Henry Hertz, and together, the two of them did all kinds of magic to make sure that lots of different authors who are interested would be able to participate. So really, I owe it to Jonathan, and he's amazing. If he hears this interview, I kind of hope he doesn't, because he already has a very swelled head. So we don't want to swell his head any further. But thank you, Jonathan. He was amazing.
Yeah, he really is. I had the chance to interview him. He's the first interview in this whole panel, and he's so great. And just the whole story of coming of age it's one that I really love learning about from so many different perspectives. Yours, Laura's, just everybody involved.
Exactly.
And your short story, Grandma Merle's Last Wish, includes thoughtful themes like courage, acceptance, and family. The protagonist, Bella, hasn't been raised in a traditional Jewish home, Bella's family doesn't really observe many of the Jewish holidays, except that they do partake in decorating a Hanukkah bush to celebrate Hanukkah. And it's pretty clear Bella will not be studying for a bat mitzvah. But when her aging grandma claims her last wish is for Bella to become a bat mitzvah, Bella realizes it may be time to start following in the footsteps of generations of Jews before her. And this may be a short story, but it's certainly an emotional roller coaster. Will you share the inspiration behind your short story?
Yes, absolutely. You might find this very surprising, but the story is actually not based on any reality.
Really?
Completely fictionalized. I came from a traditionally Jewish home. I went to Hebrew school. I had a bat mitzvah. We celebrated holidays. So my experience was nothing like what I wrote about for Bella's story. Also, I was extremely close to my grandmother. Her name was Molly. She was adorable. She was even shorter than me. I'm tiny, but she was about 4'8". She was really, really short, and she was originally from Russia, and we were extremely close. So the inspiration for the story, it's just based on I was so lucky to have a grandmother who I loved and who was kind and caring and who was close to me. And I thought, wow, what if some kid is not that lucky? What would happen if I made up a grandmother and I made it her last wish, and then she had to start doing the bat mitzvah preparation? So that's really where the inspiration came from.
Really? I can't believe that none of the events happened to you. But it's also really interesting that you loved your grandma and you thought, what if a kid didn't have that same connection with their family and their heritage?
Exactly.
So you really kind of wrote the opposite of what happened to you so that more readers, because there are a lot of readers who don't have that connection with who they are and their family. So you really wrote what a lot of kids are going through. And you actually did a really amazing job. It's just so crazy to learn that you didn't have the same experience as Bella because you wrote it so beautifully. And also, I've got to say that
Thank you.
Thank you for writing it. And I've got to say the Jewish side of my family is also really short. So
okay, good. Phew.
Yeah.
I feel your pain. I really do. But you have a chance to grow, which is really good. My chance, I can only grow backwards, which means shrinking. But there we go.
And I'm always interested in discovering more about the main characters in the stories I read and imagining what they do next. So will you share what Bella might be up to now that she granted her grandma's wish and became a bat mitzvah?
You know, it's funny. I adored this question. And I came up with this whole scenario in my head about what Bella would do and what she would think and what she became as a grown-up. I mean, I was going a little bit, the wheels were turning. But I like to think that after she became a bat mitzvah, she and Grandma Merle became very close. And she would visit Grandma Merle in Florida, and Grandma Merle would come and hang out in New York with Bella. They'd go to shows, and they might go to the 92nd Street Y here in New York to hear a lecture or a klezmer band or something Jewish and cool. So that's her immediate what would happen. Then my mind went to high school, of course, right? So maybe she gets involved in a Jewish community project or something Jewish. I don't want to say that she's going to become ultra observant because she's not, and that's all right. And that was my whole point of writing this book. This short story. There are so many different ways to be Jewish. You don't pick one, and you don't have to dictate. No one can dictate to you how to be Jewish, how to feel about being Jewish. And so I don't want to say, oh, all of a sudden Bella's going to become Orthodox. No, she's not. But maybe in college she might join a Chabad or a Hillel, or she might get involved in some way. You just never know.
Yeah, that's really the story behind my mom as well. Like, she wasn't super observant, but she joined Hillel with a man named Hillel, actually.
Oh, no way.
And he kind of connected with her heritage. And I think that it's so just wonderful, the themes that you included, because there's no perfect Jew, because we all can be Jewish in different ways, whether we decorate a Hanukkah bush, we become a B'nai Mitzvah, or we become super Orthodox and go to Hillel or Chabad. So
Absolutely.
I think it's just, while your short story was a short story, I just certainly want it to become a whole novel.
Oh, could you tell that to my agent? And then maybe we can work on that. I'll tell her you said so, because in the back of my mind, again, the wheels are always turning, so I might consider that. Thank you, Edie. I love that idea. You were asking about the fact that Jewish people in general were not exactly, sometimes we're told our stories are too Jewish, or our books are too Jewish. And where do we fit in terms of an underrepresented group? I think that was the question.
Yeah,
Am I close to it?
That was right. That was right on.
Phew, thank you. So I had just written down, which is interesting. Jews we're a minority, right? I actually Googled this. We are only 2.4% of the United States population.
Wow.
2.4%. That's tiny. And that actually includes non-religious Jews. So there are people who might identify culturally as Jewish, but they might not be religious, like Bella and her family. They're in the 2.4%. So as a Jew, we are a minority group, and we need to own it and be proud of who we are, and stereotypes need to go, flush them down the drain, because that was the other part of your question, actually.
Yeah.
There are lots of stereotypes about Jews, and I personally find them tiresome and inappropriate and not true. The other thing, growing up in New York, you had asked me if I had experienced any anti-Semitism directly, I believe, in your question. And growing up in New York, it's easy to think, oh, we're all Jewish here. There's a bagel place in every corner. There's, you can go, it's just so Jewish here. I'm near the Jewish Museum. There's a temple down the street from my apartment. My neighbors, we're all Jewish. Our apartment came with a mezuzah. So it's easy for me to just take comfort in that and to forget, oh, well, I'm not really a minority, right? This isn't a problem, but it is.
Yeah.
And we all need to remind ourselves not to be complacent. Once we're complacent, then it becomes dangerous.
Yeah, that's such a great answer, and I really agree, because it's just shocking to learn that we're only 2.4% of the entire US population, yet a lot of our books that are Jewish themed, they're considered, for instance, too Jewish, or they're not diverse, but we're such a diverse group of people. So I think your answer is just so true, and I really agree. It's shocking to learn that we're only 2.4% of the entire US population, but none of the Jewish themed books are considered diverse. And having an anthology to look to, like Coming of Age, it just makes me so happy. Finally finding that book that I need. All of the short stories, because I'm going to become a B'nai Mitzvah, a Bar Mitzvah in 2 years. And I love middle grade books. They're my favorite genre, my favorite age group to read in. But there are a lot of, maybe Hanukkah books, or for instance, Purim. They're starting to get into Purim books now. Yeah. Passover, but
that's a minor holiday, right? Yeah. If we think about it, Purim, sure, it's fun. It's a minor holiday. Even Hanukkah, let's be honest, it's a minor holiday. And that's what we see. You're absolutely right. In the so-called Jewish category.
And just finding a coming of age book about B'nai Mitzvahs, it's the best. And it makes me so happy. I know and another great thing about it is the coming of age anthology educates others about B'nai Mitzvahs and our heritage. So that just adds on to this incredible book.
Oh, that's so nice of you to say. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
And that was really part of it when, at the beginning, talking about when Jonathan and I started talking and it wasn't out there, and talking about Jewish books in general, and then Jonathan and Henry Hertz made it happen. And then we were thinking about kids like you. What would you get from this? What would you learn? What would you want to see? Do you see yourself in any of these stories? And that's really what we want to see, that kids can look at these stories and say, hey, I relate to that, or maybe, no, I don't relate to that, but isn't that cool?
Yeah. And I know that so many kids see that in the coming of age anthology. And my next question is one that I really like asking authors and just all people in the book industry. Like, was there someone who inspired you to pursue writing? A parent, author, teacher, role model, really just anybody?
You know, that's a great question, and I have a really weird answer. I always knew I wanted to be a writer. It never crossed my mind that I would do anything else. That when I was little, I wrote all the time. I loved to write letters. I wrote the weirdest letters. My parents actually kept every single letter I ever wrote to them, and they numbered them. So I found them in a box in their apartment. So I always wrote. And I even remember when I was little, I was riding on my bicycle and just thinking to myself, I'm going to be a writer. I just knew that.
A bike rider?
Yeah, I want to be a bike rider.
Yeah.
Ride about bikes.
Yeah.
But I was on my bike riding and thinking that I wanted to be a writer. And it's something I always just knew.
Yeah.
And also, I went to, I don't know if you knew this, but I went to this really weird hippy-dippy progressive school in Greenwich Village. So my teachers always knew I liked to write. So they encouraged me, and they didn't make me do math because I was really bad at math. They thought, poor Melissa, she cannot do math. Let her do some more writing. So I was able to write as much as I wanted, and my teachers at City and Country always encouraged me. My parents encouraged me. My friends encouraged me because they liked to read what I wrote. So I would say that encouragement came from so many different sources, but mostly it came from within.
Yeah, I totally understand that. That does make sense.
Yeah.
And also, I want to go to your school because it just sounds like such a fun place, and the teachers are so supportive. That sounds like the best feeling. Like you get to learn what you want to learn.
Yes, exactly. It's actually the oldest progressive school in the country. It's still there. It's it's on 13th Street now, but it used to be on 12th Street. And I wrote all about it in my first middle grade novel, Cat Creating Comes Clean. That's the inspiration for that one. So the characters are a lot of people I went to school with, and the teachers, we called them by their first names. And it was just a free-for-all of do what you want and be free and do what you love. So I think you would be very happy there. If you ever come to New York, I will take you on a tour of City and Country School. I promise.
I would love that. And now it's time for my final question of the interview. The question I ask every single one, basically everybody I interview.
Yes.
If you could be or meet any literary character, fictional or real, who would it be and why?
This one is too easy. It's like you handed it to me. I am a huge, keep saying huge fan of Harriet the Spy. It's my favorite book in the world. Have you read it?
I haven't, but I need to.
You need to, and I'm going to give you homework. You have to read this book. It will change your life, E, I promise you. But the reason why I loved Harriet, why I want to be her, and everything about her rang so true to me. She's an only child. She grew up in New York. Her parents were very loving, but quite distracted. She loved to write. But she was braver than me. She could do anything and say what she wanted and just be out there. And she was so genuine and so authentic. And I admired her so much. And I wish she were real sometimes, because I would just love to meet her and hug her and just talk to her. But it's Harriet M. Welsh from the book Harriet the Spy by Louise Fitzhugh.
Well, I certainly need to read Harriet the Spy, and I know that you are a lot like Harriet from the descriptions that I've heard. Also, I saw your post that said I was today years old when I spoke up when a man interrupted me. So in just small ways, you're acting like Harriet the Spy, speaking up for yourself.
Thank you. That's really kind. Thank you.
And everybody, my guest today has been the extraordinary Melissa Roska. She's just incredible. Her short story, 1 out of 13, is a must read. And I hope I'm going to get in contact with her agent. I'm going to say, hey, you need to make this an actual book. And because I know that you're going to love Grandma Merle's Last Wish and all of the short stories in the Coming of Age anthology. So what are you waiting for? Like, seriously, you need to get your hands on a copy of the Coming of Age anthology. And just thank you so much for joining me, Melissa.
Thank you, Edie. You rock. Thank you.
Thanks, you do too. And just have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, keep reading, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train and welcome to E-Train Talks, where I talk everything books in the hopes to inspire others to love reading as much as I do. Today, I'm thrilled to be chatting with the award-winning middle grade author and poet, Laura Chauvin, about her short story, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Bima, featured in one of my favorite new reads, Coming of Age, 13 B'nai Mitzvah Stories, the first Jewish anthology sharing B'nai Mitzvah stories I've ever read, and hopefully not the last. Laura, thanks so much for joining me today.
I'm so happy to talk to you, E. I'm really glad to be here and have a chance to chat about this great book.
Yeah, it really is a great book, and I'm so honored that I have the opportunity to chat with you. So to everybody listening, here's a brief summary about Coming of Age. So Coming of Age was such a fun and meaningful read, filled with 13 unique and entertaining stories about 13 different kids experiencing one thing in common, their Jewish bar or bat mitzvah. As someone that will be going through my own bar mitzvah in the future, I really appreciate the experiences all of the 13 different protagonists went through. But what's really nice about Coming of Age is that really all middle graders can relate to what the main characters go through. So I'm so glad you can join me on E-Train Talks, Laura, to help share more about this wonderful and needed book.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, will you share how you ended up involved in contributing your story to the Coming of Age anthology?
Yes, as you know, E, I'm a PJ Our Way author. So I had a book called Takedown that has a Jewish character and was part of the PJ Our Way program. And in 2019, I went on a trip with several other PJ Our Way authors to visit Israel. And one of the editors of this anthology, Jonathan Rosen, was also on that trip. So I was so excited when he asked me to be part of this project. I believe in what Jonathan and Henry are doing. I know that part of the proceeds of this book are going to help combat anti-Semitism, which is so important. And because there's been such a rise in anti-Semitism, especially in the United States. And so I was really excited, but I will tell you, my own bat mitzvah there was a lot of family drama at my own bat mitzvah. So I had to do a lot of work and think about my own experience before I could write my story.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a Jewish ceremony if there wasn't some family drama involved.
Correct. This is true.
So I'm so glad you were able to get involved in the B'nai Mitzvah Stories. And I really liked that you kind of made your story feel really real. Like, you weren't on another planet, the planet Lotka. You weren't on Noah's Ark. You kind of made it feel real, and you added relevant themes like friendship. So I'm very grateful that you not only added Jewish themes, but you also added themes that you can see a lot in new middle grade novels.
Yeah, it was important to me because I want this. I mean, I think we all want kids who are not Jewish to feel welcome by this book. And and read the stories and enjoy them. It was important to me that my character, Danny, have some friends who, even though they're not Jewish, they understand the stress that she's feeling about her upcoming bat mitzvah. So they don't have to share her exact culture in order to understand what she's going through and how she's feeling about it. And in that way, they can be good allies to her, even though they don't share a Jewish background.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's so true. I know that a lot of people have friends, and very important friends that mean a lot to them, who may not share the same religion, who may not be from the same culture, but they still always stand by each other's sides and stand up for each other, despite the fact that they might celebrate different holidays, eat different foods, because it's all about coming together and accepting each other.
Exactly.
And,
I agree.
Yeah. And unfortunately, not enough people are informed or have any experience with the Jewish culture or even know what a B'nai Mitzvah is. So can you explain a little bit about what a bar or bat mitzvah is, and what are some of the ups and downs leading up to the big day?
So I may not be the best person to ask this question because it has been such a long time since my own bat mitzvah. But basically, it is a coming of age ceremony where you as a 13-year-old show that you are responsible enough to be a full part of the Jewish community. And the way you do that is by participating in the service, the Friday night, Saturday morning service, in a special way, which is that you are in charge of reading a section of the Torah scroll for the whole congregation. And that takes a lot of work and study. You know, most American kids who go to Reform temples, like I did, don't speak Hebrew. So you have to learn the Hebrew. So you're learning the meaning behind the Torah portion in Hebrew, but you also have to get comfortable with reading it out loud. And you don't just read it, you chant it. So you're learning a language, you're learning music, you're learning the religious meaning behind your Torah portion. And by doing all of that work and all of that study, that is how you're showing that you're responsible and becoming an adult member of your congregation, of the Jewish community.
Well, it makes a lot of sense that since the B'nai Mitzvah is a coming-of-age ceremony, it's kind of your transition into being a member of this Jewish community. It makes sense that this novel is called Coming of Age.
Exactly.
And I think that a lot of people, they don't know really a lot about B'nai Mitzvah. So I think that your summary kind of gives a little bit more perspective, and everybody can have different opinions about, I just think that a B'nai Mitzvah is very special, and I want people to really understand what it is and why it's important. Because a lot of people treat other religions, like other ceremonies, they don't really understand how important it is, how meaningful it is for others. So they don't really take the time to kind of understand. So I think that Coming of Age is a really good job of including Jewish themes, but also kind of making it like a safe space for both Jewish readers and also other readers who may not share the same religion and culture.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think a lot of kids who are involved with their faith have that experience where from the outside it looks like it's all about a big party.
Yeah.
And a lot of us as authors is, as you know, some of the stories talk about this directly, but we've also all talked about this. But there is a moment, even though we're all looking forward to the party, there's a moment after all of the preparation, and you will experience this someday, not too long from now, when you stand up there as a 13-year-old and your whole family and all your Hebrew school friends and all your school friends are out in the audience. And it does feel very momentous. It feels like you are doing something special, and you feel that connection back through time with all of the 13-year-olds who have gone through this experience in the past. And for me, that moment was, we're not allowed to touch the Torah scroll because it's holy. And so there's a pointer with a little hand on it, and it's usually gold or golden, and it's called a yad. And there was something about that moment for me. I didn't put it in my story because for reasons, but that moment of holding the yad and just reflecting on the idea that this book is so important that we don't touch it with our fingers, and all the people who might have held this pointer before me, that was the thing that sticks in my mind, the detail that sticks in my mind of this being a very special thing that I was doing in the moment that I was doing it. And so all these many, many years later, that's what I really remember as the sort of that moment where my brain went, oh, this is really something magical. Shouldn't say magical. Magical is not the right word. Momentous.
Yeah, and I can't wait for my moments when I have my B'nai Mitzvah, my Bar Mitzvah, holding the yod, going up at the bima, and just kind of chanting my heart out. And I think that it can feel like a momentous occasion, but it can also feel daunting. Like, it's like you're basically doing something that so many people have done before you, and so many people are going to do after you. Mm-hmm. So it can feel daunting. But I think that it's also just like an occasion. It's so memorable. It's momentous. It's memorable. There are so many different adjectives to describe it. And I think that your novel does a really good job of, like, the entire coming of age novel and your short story. It does a really good job of kind of bringing it back down to earth. Like, because a lot of people say, like, it's the most amazing thing that's happened to them. But for kids, a lot of people don't remember that for kids, when they were kids, it might have been a super scary experience. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going in front of all these people. Or when it's 2 weeks before the big day, oh my gosh, I haven't started my speech.
Right.
So it can feel like a really scary experience. But like you said, it's momentous. And once it's over with, you're going to feel really good about yourself. And you're becoming a part of an important community. You're doing something important.
Exactly. And I thank you for bringing that up. The theme of my story is about a girl who, although she's comfortable reading from the Torah scroll, because there's a script, but for the speech she's going to give with her bat mitzvah ceremony, that is all on her. She has to write the words of that speech and make it. And there's nobody there to correct her if she makes a misstep. And so, hilariously, I hope, she asks everybody she knows for a bit of advice about her speech. And one person's advice is more outlandish than the next. Next thing you know, she's spinning circles and flushing ice cubes down the toilet.
Well, it's certainly a silly experience and a silly short story, but also a very meaningful one. And I'm so grateful that you wrote it and that you were a part of the coming of age story. So your short story is one of the only ones in the coming of age anthology set in the present day. The protagonist, Danny, hasn't started her bat mitzvah speech yet, and the big day is coming up fast. So she looks for help from her non-Jewish friends, but along the way, encounters many twists and turns on her way to the bima. So were there any similarities between your bat mitzvah experience and Danny's?
It's so funny. Like I said earlier, there was a lot of drama around my own bat mitzvah. And I think that although in the end, everything worked out okay, because it has a way of doing that. I, at the time that I was 13, didn't feel like I was getting the help that I needed, at least not in the beginning, in order to study and do a good job. So I kind of, with this story, because I wanted to make it funny, I went in the totally opposite direction, where Danny is getting too much help and isn't really relying on herself. So I would say I went from, no help and not feeling like I was getting the support I needed, to a character who's so overwhelmed with help and support that it's actually making her more stressed out.
Yeah, and so there may be your story might be like nearly completely opposite to Danny's, but it's also kind of similar. You're both kind of stressed, and you incorporated yourself into your characters, which I love seeing in novels, because when an author incorporates their experiences into their main character or one of the characters involved, it really adds more depth to a story. And the reader kind of gets pulled in even more because the author knows from experience what's going on. And that's why I really love anthologies, realistic fiction, just because it kind of feels so real. Like you're on the bima, sharing your speech and kind of putting yourself out there along with the character.
Yeah, I love that. And I love to write realistic fiction. I will say that one of the things I always do when I'm writing realistic fiction is I do interviews. So for this story, short as it is, I interviewed a family who, this was during the height of the pandemic. So they had a Zoom mitzvah during the pandemic, which the bar mitzvah boy was nervous, like Danny is in the story. And so doing his bar mitzvah over Zoom was actually really helpful for him because he felt less put on the spot. And I also interviewed a rabbi who does a lot of tutoring with kids, and she helps me a ton with this story. But when I do interviews, it helps me get those little details that make a story feel more realistic.
Yeah, and that's why it's called realistic fiction, because the characters might be fictional, but the experiences are realistic. They are real. And also, my cousin actually, who's very close to me, he went to our house. So it was a very fun experience. So it was during the height of COVID. He wasn't able to do his bar mitzvah for over a year. It was delayed by a year. And then on the day when he was doing it on Zoom, there was a power outage at his house, and he had to bring all of his stuff over to my house. And it can always be really hectic, but like you said, it just always turns out really special, and it's always going to turn out good. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one of the other authors, Melissa Roski, talks about that actually in her story. She talks about the idea that the B'nai Mitzvah doesn't necessarily have to look like everybody else's. It can look like Zoom. It can look like going to your cousin's house because that's what is necessary that day. It can look like just having a private ceremony in your rabbi's office. And I really love Melissa's story for that reason, exactly as you say, because it reminds us to be flexible, and that it's the engaging with the words of the Torah as B'nai Mitzvah, that's the important piece. And all of the other pieces can move around, change, adapt as they need to.
Yeah, that is so true. And it leads me to my next question. So I'm always looking for Jewish book recommendations. And while there unfortunately aren't many, I'm always ready to jump on an opportunity when I find one. So do you have any recommendations?
I am ready for this question. I really had to think about it, but the one that came to mind is this. It is a graphic novel, Passover Haggadah. And as soon as I saw this was out, I knew I had to buy. Actually bought 2 copies. And this is the Haggadah that my family used this year for our Passover Seder. And my whole family really enjoyed it. We had a great time using this Haggadah for our Seder this year. I don't even know what to say about it. It's just like really engaging. If you're a graphic novel person, it's great. My family is interfaith, so there are some people in the family who are less familiar with the stories that we tell on Passover, and having the illustrations alongside the prayers in English and in Hebrew, it just made our Seder extra special this year.
That sounds like such a fun experience. I'll have to look into the graphic novel Haggadah. And because it's always pretty, there's a lot of commotion when it comes to Passover here.
Always.
So I think that might really help. While we've done it many times before, we always find ourselves in pretty hilarious situations. And I think that making it a graphic novel was such a fun idea, and I really want a copy of it. I
totally agree. It's just I don't even know how. You know what it is? Here's part of what I love about it. Doing it as a graphic novel allowed the authors and illustrators to do things like in parts of the story when the Haggadah talks about Jews leaving Egypt and enslavement, there are images in the graphic novel. There are illustrations of things like what's going on in Ukraine and and other parts of history, just to show the connection, not only with Jewish people, but people around the world who are enslaved or oppressed. And to me, it just drove home how important it is to keep telling this story, because it's a story that keeps repeating itself in our society.
Yeah, I think that that's so beautiful, and finding similarities between certain like relevant topics, because a lot of people don't really know the Jewish story, like our heritage, our culture. So kind of comparing its similarities to a really relevant topic like Ukraine or other different wars or battles or anything really, I think it can be extremely helpful. And I need to get my hands on a copy of that graphic novel. I think it'd be so great to share with my family.
Mhm.
And I think I honestly really appreciate that recommendation. And I think that I'm thrilled. I think that'll help us a lot.
We, like I said, we had a great time with it. And yeah, I know there are families who collect many different versions of Haggadot. And we've been using the same boring one for a really long time. So this just made it extra exciting and fun to tell the Passover story this year.
That sounds like so much fun. And that leads me to my next question. So this is unfortunately our final question of the day. So if this is a question I ask all my guests, and I always enjoy hearing the different answers and just learning more about the authors themselves, because I think that the answers all really kind of tell a story in themselves. So if you could be or meet any literary character, fictional or real, from any time period, who would it be and why?
All right, so I picked one that I love so much. And this is who I would be. And I was thinking about being 13, because this is a book about a 13-year-old who's also going through a coming of age. And it is the new translation of the Japanese novel Kiki's Delivery Service, which many people may know from Studio Ghibli. It's a very famous anime. And I would love to have been Kiki at age 13. In this story, Kiki is a young girl who's about to turn 13, and her mother's a witch. And because Kiki is also a witch who's coming of age, in her culture, that means she has to leave home and fly off and find a town who needs a witch. And as a witch, she's going to use her powers. She only has one power, and that's the power of flight. So she has to come up with a business or a way to support herself as a witch with her power of flight. And as you can tell from the title, the business she comes up with is a delivery service. And I love this story because Kiki, all along, her parents are a little unsure. They're not sure she's old enough. And all along, she's very confident. Now, when she actually moves away from her family and moves to a really big town, she has moments where she's feeling a little less self-assured, but she always believes in herself. And I love her adventures and the fact that this is a 13-year-old who, not only in her own mind, but her whole culture is supporting the idea that she can be independent and live on her own, running this business based on her powers as a witch. And have you ever seen the movie?
I have not.
Oh my gosh. Movie is great. The book is great. Highly recommend it. It's one of those movies and books that just when I'm maybe feeling a little sad, that's one of the ones that I would go to for a pick-me-up.
Thanks so much for the recommendation. And it sounds like such a thrilling coming of age story. And also, I find that it seems really interesting in a way that a lot of cultures might, as you know, there have been a lot of witch stories where people are accused people of being witches and think that it's a bad thing. But I guess in that culture, in the story at least, they kind of accept who she is, and they find ways to utilize her and help her. So I think that that's also another great addition to the anime, which I need to see. Thanks so much for the recommendation. And the story, the cover, and just the title itself. Well, I don't like judging books by their covers. That's a beautiful cover. I can't wait to read it.
Well, I hope you enjoy it, and let me know what you think after you have a chance to watch the movie and read the book.
I will definitely let you know what I think. And thanks so much for joining me today. My guest today, everybody, has been Laura Chauvin, author and poet, as well as one of the many great authors with short stories featured in the Coming of Age Anthology. Laura, thanks so much for joining me. Sorry, I
was going to say it was an honor. I'm so excited to tell you how much fun this was that I'm talking over you. Forgive me.
It's okay. Thank you so much. I'm just glad that I had the opportunity to talk with you. And to all of you listening, to find out more about Laura, be sure to check out her Twitter at Laura Chauvin, LauraShovan, and her website, laurachauvin.com. And that's all for now, everybody. As always, stay safe and happy reading.